Are we checking? Do we have audio?
Checking audio?
Checking.
Hello?
Check audio, yes. Audio, yes. 1, 2. I think we got it.
Sibilance.
Yes from the okay, yes from the start. Do we have audio? Now? We do. We have audio now. Well, that was probably the best opening I've ever done for this stream. But let's try to run it again. Welcome. I'm glad to be back. I'm your host and community developer, Douglas Lilly. Last week, Dan and Baja took things over, and they did a magnificent job. If it's your first time joining us for the Rocksmith developer stream, we like to talk about music, different facets of music, sometimes very technical theory based, sometimes just music appreciation. Today, we are going to be talking about very practical aspects of releasing an album during a pandemic. Hopefully we won't have to worry about that for too much longer, but I think it's an interesting topic and we can talk about it. And maybe if there are future catastrophes and you still want to release music, you'll learn something from this that you can apply to your albums in the future. Coming up also after this conversation, we are going to hear from our very special community guests, Audrey and Kate, who have done a couple of songs. And we're going to hear from Sam Schwartz with a lesson on how to transfer your guitar skills to Mandolin. That's all coming up later. Also keep an eye out in the chat. Keep an eye out in the chat for Evie Dork. That is Baja. She is our community manager on Rocksmith, and she will be taking your questions in the chat and sending them on our way. So if you have questions for myself, for Dr. Margaret, or for Shane, let us know. And without further ado, again, I would like to introduce our guests today, Dr. Margaret Jones and Shane Gann. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. We can hear each other now. So
excellent.
You both, Shane, you just released an album with Hail the Sun.
I did.
And Dr. Jones, you will be releasing an album. You've got a single
later
and an
summer.
album coming.
Yeah, the single's coming tomorrow, and then the album's coming later this summer.
Later this summer? TBD, I assume? TBD.
Yeah, the funny thing about like this past year is normally you'd have like a release show lined up, but we're still trying to figure out what that is. So we're like, well, we should wait to announce a date until we have like a nice release show lined up in this at least the same week. But like, so
and
probably sometime in July.
And just so everybody knows, the group, the band that you're releasing is M. Jones and the Melee.
Yes.
And we're going to have information on that in the chat, on where you can find out information on both of those. So I guess, yeah, that's a good place to start. I noticed, honestly, just in the past maybe 6 to 8 weeks, there's been, to my notice, a pretty significant jump in album releases compared to the entirety of 2020. And I assume a lot of that does have to do with the inability to have shows or tour to support albums. Has that been the case for you, or is it just a matter of a lot of musicians have been locked away and just wrote an album over the past year and are now ready to release it? What's the deal, musicians? Dr. Marge, let's start with you.
Okay, so my band is pretty new, and it was pretty new going into the pandemic, which was incredibly frustrating. Like just a side note, like the beginning of 2020, I basically found out that I got the job with Rocksmith, and then 2 days later we went into lockdown. So like that has been my life for the last year, which has been amazing. Like I've had a great time, but it's sort of like the plan just turned on its head. I'd naively gone into 2020 saying like, this is going to be the year we make an album and we launch the band properly. And then we go and we tour and we do all these things. Yay. No, that didn't happen. So we had to kind of regroup, and after, to be honest, like a month or two of just kind of being depressed and unhappy, we just kind of regrouped and were like, all right, if we're not going to do the rollout that we were planning on doing, which was getting in the studio a bunch of times and recording singles and releasing them kind of the way that you're used to seeing on Spotify nowadays, where like there'll be a single and then there'll be another single and then there'll be like a, you know, like a B-side or something, and then eventually the album drops. We were kind of planning on doing that, and we're like, well, that's not going to happen. Let's just record an album. We have the songs, like we're sitting on them. They're going to feel old 2 years from now. Let's just do them now.
And that's, I think, you know, we'd had a few conversations. I don't remember, Marge, if I talked to you about this specifically, but we had talked on the stream, especially, you know, independent artists, that releasing singles on streaming platforms is sort of a viable way to release music now, rather than an album.
Yeah, for sure.
Label support. Shane, what about Hail the Sun? What was sort of what led you all to release an album now?
Well, we in some ways we had a similar situation where we were actually in the recording studio at the beginning of 2020 in January and February, and right at the end of February we wrapped the recording. We were so excited. It was like, we did it, we finished, let's, you know, and then because we're on a label, especially the plans that you were talking about where a band will have a tour or a show or something to go along with the release, they were, you know, pretty adamantly like, we have to wait. We don't know what's going on right now. And we kind of just had to sit on the record for an entire year while we sort of saw the world pan out. And long story short, we got to basically like December or so of last year. We were like, it's been long enough. Can we please start putting stuff out? We want to release a single and all of this. And the label was like, okay, I think we can kind of start making moves into early 2021. So our rollout started in January of this year, a whole year since we started tracking.
Right.
But I would say a benefit in some ways to the whole approach, to having that much time, I guess, is that we were able to put together, a video for all of our singles and full merch lines that went along with each single. And we did 4 singles total that, you know, built up this release in a different way than it would have been able to be built up had the whole 2020 not happened the way it did.
So did the singles start coming in January?
Yes, and we did one every month roughly.
Okay, right.
Up until the last month when the album came out.
I mean, I want to ask. I don't know if there's going to be like a juicy answer here, but how frustrating must it be to just have to sit on that album, just knowing, like, did you have to keep it quiet, or did people sort of know it was coming eventually, or did you just have to?
They definitely knew because we were posting from while we were in the studio. Yeah, so
right.
People were asking about it, and we had to sort of not dodge the answers because everybody was very understanding, but there was a little bit of that, like you said, frustration to just be sort of sitting, have your hands tied, mouth zipped closed, that whole thing.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that it sort of gave you some opportunities that you might not have otherwise had in a normal year with a normal sort of release cadence with the album and album support. Marge, did as a new group, were you able to sort of pull any positive elements from this staggered, this delayed release?
I think there are some positives. By and large, I mean, like, the last year has been frustrating, but I think like we had a similar experience on like a smaller scale to what Shane was talking about, where we were going to try to kind of piecemeal work our way through things. Like, everybody has jobs, everybody has independent lives, and we're trying to make the band work in between the gaps. And having to kind of pump the brakes was the opportunity where we could actually spend the time to make an album instead of just kind of cobbling together from a bunch of singles, because there are the logistics of like, you know, renting studio space and having the time with like the same engineer the whole time, getting everything off to the mastering engineer at the same time, so you get something that feels like a cohesive record. And I think our record sounds more cohesive for that.
Okay.
You know, like, we're new, we're doing stuff pretty DIY. Actually, during the last year of quarantine, we basically set up a recording studio in our rehearsal space. And like, we're super lucky that the bass player in the band is also a recording engineer. So he was able to kind of set us up with something that was going to sound plausible, but like, it was definitely less than ideal scenario. Like, we don't have the acoustic treatment on the walls that you'd get in a studio. And like, we're sort of cobbling together all the microphones we need from each of our own like personal collections, just to try to like mic the drum set right. And I think we managed to pull it off for like, especially given like what we know about what our setup was. Like, I think it sounds fantastic. And, you know, when we sent it off to mastering, they were like, wait, you recorded this in your rehearsal space? And I was like, yes, we did it. But, you know, like, that probably wouldn't have happened. We probably would have spent money in unwise ways, just kind of getting off the ground by trying to do the things that are sort of like the high ticket, like, here's how you do it right kinds of ways, but doing it piecemeal because that's how we have to do it. So in that sense, I think we actually benefited a little bit from having to pump the brakes. But that said, we also lost a lot of momentum. Like, we'd been running some like social media ads that were gearing up toward playing shows, and those didn't do anything.
Right. It's just
but that's just money that went out into the universe, and it's gone now. And we have to kind of start over with that. Not from zero, but, you know, like, anytime you're running a campaign, like, it's toward a specific goal, and then when it doesn't pan out, you kind of have to regroup and figure out what you're doing again. So, you know, there were setbacks, there were things that were like the silver lining of the last year. I'm super glad that we have an album coming out instead of just a bunch of mismatched singles. But that's kind of, you know, like, that's the balance that we've been hitting.
And did I assume when did you end up wrapping on recording, if you can say?
We wrapped on recording in early January.
Okay.
And then we spent about a month in mixing, and then another month in mastering.
Okay. So it sounds like M. Jones the Melee recorded late enough and Hail the Sun recorded early enough that there wasn't that chance to go back and like over tinker. If that's even something that you would have had the opportunity to do. I don't know the logistics of that. And if you can say, this is something that I'm not sure if you can speak on right now, but I assume, you know, as things are beginning to open back up and people are able to start being in contact again, you know, our live shows being pursued, and what is that like right now? Is everybody just like fully booked right now, as far as you know, because everybody's trying to get shows right now, or are people still being very hesitant and tentative about booking shows because everything's still unknown enough, at least in this area?
I've experienced a little bit of both. I would say, like, we have a booking agent, and that job, that necessitates some forward thinking and some constant, like, you know, the whole last year, our booking agent was like, okay, well, this one got canceled. These are the new dates. Okay, this one got canceled. These are the new dates. And it just kept pushing forward to where now we still technically have dates, and we're still sort of like, fingers crossed, hope it all pans out. But on the other side of things, going back to like a real release date scheduling, for our last release, we did some in-store performances to sort of celebrate and bring in, you know, more local customers, support the record stores and all of that. And we had those plans on the books, or, you know, at least in our minds, to go through for this release. But the stores themselves were the ones, especially, that were like, we're not really comfortable, you know, asking people to come in and do this. And we didn't want to push it at all. It was just, again, it's sort of one of the normalcies of a normal rollout.
Yeah.
But we ended up sort of pivoting and doing a virtual in-store where if people bought the record at a store, then they got to join a Zoom call with us. And we
nice.
sort of turned it, sort of spun it in a way that made it work.
And you did some, we talked, I think, on a previous time that you were on, Shane, we talked about like just trying out stuff with streaming shows, like different opportunities, ways to make that more engaging, ways to sort of give a show that you wouldn't be able to give necessarily in a live setting. And that Zoom call seems like a sort of great way to do that. Marge, what about yourself?
Yeah, in terms of booking shows, it's been interesting. Like we did have a couple shows in the books last year that got canceled, and by good luck, those are also places where we happen to like have a good relationship with the booking managers. So like it was sort of like as we gear back up, like even though you're new, like you get some kind of pride of place. Like we're gonna make sure that you get a show, which has been really nice. We're on the radar of a lot of places, but they are kind of booked solid because they're honoring all of the shows that they had to cancel. And again, it's still fingers crossed. It's like, is this even going to happen? And we're talking about like September. Like, is September even going to happen? It's like, whoa, that's still a long time away.
Because you've got capacity issues to deal with. Like they might be open back up, but if they can only be open at a quarter capacity, what happens to those tickets?
What happens if you have to honor the tickets that you postponed, like all that kind of stuff? Like it's just, it gets tricky. There's a lot of outdoor stuff happening. Like some venues have combined forces, at least in the Bay Area, and moved outdoors to like, they set up a stage in a parking lot with seats, and they're like, you register, you reserve your table so you can socially distance and stuff. So like it's still safe. We're playing a show like that in a few weeks, which will be fun. But yeah, like it's kind of uncharted waters with booking shows the way that you used to.
Right. So Shane, how many albums have you released now?
This was, I believe, our 5th full length, and we've done 2 EPs.
Congrats.
So
Thank you.
Congratulations. That's a hefty catalog.
It is.
So how does it? I imagine it has to feel a little bit different releasing now without having that support. Just emotionally, like is there a difference in how you would normally you work on the thing and then you work on it and then there's a little bit of a pause and then you push it out and everybody's like into the music, and then they see your show and there's that sort of very rapid kind of loop of sending out your music and getting that feedback back. With this, how does it feel? Has it been, I don't want to ask if it's been, this is a tricky question potentially. It's got to be different.
It has been, overall, it's been, I guess, equally gratifying in different ways. Again, going back to the fact that we changed our rollout plan pretty drastically. Even our label was saying, they hadn't approached a rollout quite so specifically, where each song is given a video and specific merch items and all of that. And so because we were putting so much behind each song leading up to the album, the hype was building in a similar fashion as it would were we, planning to go on a tour and people would be excited about going to the show. Yeah. So even though we didn't get that real, in-person gratifying feeling of like, here's the performance to go with the album, let's all celebrate this together in a room, we still got that. And actually, I forgot to mention this. I didn't join because I'm in Arizona now, but 3 of my members, the other 3 are still in the Los Angeles area. And they actually worked with a venue in the area to put together a listening party the week that the album came out, actually the night before the album came out. And it was very, small capacity and everything, very responsibly done. But that was like the small version of that sort of gratifying feeling. And even though I wasn't there, I saw how excited the people that were got about the whole thing. So
good. Good. I'm glad you had that. Marge, have you over this past year, in speaking with other musicians, have you seen any kind of bright spots of artists coming together, or sort of artist venue support? Has there been moments that you've been able to pick out, or has it been pretty bleak?
Actually, there have been bright moments. It's like, not gonna lie, it's been really hard. It's been hard to see venues that, venues you dreamed about playing close before you get a chance to play in them. Or, like, especially starting out as a performing musician. Like, I've been in the business for a while, but in this capacity, I'm fairly new to the scene. So, seeing a place like Slim's close before you get a chance to play it, it's just it's a bummer. But that said, the light in the darkness has kind of been how much community has come together to support the venues that have survived, and that has been really heartening. And that's everything from community members coming out and just, like buying like cocktail to go kits to just kind of keep the bottom line going for like some of the like tried and true Bay Area venues. And then it's stuff like Hardly Strictly, which is like one of the biggest nonprofit music festivals in the world, I think. But for anyone that doesn't know, like every year in the late summer, early fall, it's 3 days of a music festival that is completely free to attend.
Oh wow!
Like this past year, obviously it didn't happen. But rather than just kind of like being like, well, I guess that's it then, they donated tons of money to local venues to keep them afloat, which was a game changer. Those grants were a game changer for a bunch of different venues. And then we saw also some venues teaming up, and some of the outdoor spaces. So one I can think of specifically is like the Ivy Room in Albany, California, which is like just north of Berkeley for anyone who's not from the area. And then the Fireside Lounge in Alameda, California, which is just south of Oakland. Or just south of the port of Oakland. They teamed up, and they have one of those outdoor dining music venues. So they are sort of teaming up on the booking. So they're both sort of keeping the music alive through this outdoor venue. So like those are places that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there are places like that all around the world.
Right.
But like those are the ones I can think of.
Shane, have you noticed any kind of bright spots?
There are honestly. Everybody has had to find bright spots everywhere, and like Marge is saying, the music community is really the brightest provider of those, which has been so, I guess, eye-opening to me in the last short while, especially as things begin to sort of move towards opening up. And I guess in the beginning too, when things were in really precarious situations, everybody has stepped up. Bands, fans, just communities and organizations alike have all been so supportive and made it so clear what live music especially means to everybody. And it's to the point where, like, before we've done a couple of live streams I haven't touched on. Those I don't necessarily see as a bright spot. Those were more like a necessity than anything else. But when I was in the rehearsal space with my band playing, before we even began to perform on our instruments, while we were still waiting for some guys to arrive, I heard from the next room over just this guy like playing guitar, and I was just like getting into it in a weird way. And I was like, oh, I didn't even realize it means so much to hear the experience of music.
Right.
I had a similar experience just getting ready for another live stream where it's not the same as being in the room with a bunch of people who are here to hear your music and you connect with them and like you lock eyes with somebody and you share that moment. But just hearing like a guitar amp and a drum kit on stage.
Right.
Like hearing the sound check, it was just like, oh, okay.
Like personally, I at this point I just want to get out. I just want to make some noise. Like I don't care if it's good. I don't care what it is. I just want to be loud
It's like the potential energy of it.
Yeah. Like it's there, and I don't know. It feels like I don't think I'm alone in this, in sort of regretting not having taken advantage of it before. And now I'm like, well, now I know that I really want to do that, and I want to get out and be noisy with a guitar or bass or drums. I don't play drums, but I'll get out and I'll play some drums if that's what it takes.
In my band, and I won't say the name of the venue because it is kind of a dig, but we had a really bad gig right before lockdown. And we're like, man, I want to go back and play that really, really, really bad gig.
Yeah. I would rather
like everything about it was bad. The sound was bad. Like not many people came out. The beer was too expensive. Like everything was bad. Like we didn't get drink tickets. Like that's a normal thing if you play a show. Like just nothing.
Right.
But it was like, yeah, get me back there. I want to do that again.
I would rather play the worst gig I've ever played than not play a gig for a year, I guess. Got a few questions from the chat, but before that, one more question I wanted to ask you. Have you noticed from your perspectives, and Shane, I know Hail the Sun is on a label, and M. Jones of the Melee is completely independent?
Independent.
Just the four of you?
Our own beast, yes.
Just put it out. Have you seen changes in the industry, the industry adapting to the pandemic, that you think may persist into the future?
It's a big question to unwrap.
I don't know. We're still in it, so it's not like we're through it. And this is purely speculative.
I can speak from like the independent standpoint that, going into it, and I was trying to do this already. Like, it's not like I was completely thrown in cold, but, like we are DIY, we do our own everything. So we have become our own AV engineers. We engineered our own album. We mixed our own album. We did send it to someone else for mastering to get us a fresh set of ears on the tracks. And I think the album benefited from that. Yeah. But when we do our first couple music videos, which we're already working on, I bought a camera. We are doing that ourselves. I've learned how to use Logic. I've learned how to use Premiere Pro. I've learned how to use InDesign. I've learned how to use Adobe Suite. I know all these things that I didn't know before. And it was just out of it's not like I didn't know how to use some of these things already, but I've become much better at them out of necessity, just because that was the only way we could get stuff done over the last year within our budget and within the constraints that we were working under. So I think it wouldn't be surprising at all to see a lot more indie artists and new artists just kind of grabbing the reins and doing their own thing.
Absolutely.
I completely agree. And even going up through the entire gamut, everybody had to learn a brand new skill set, at least one, over the last year.
Yeah, it's everybody's better at web streaming, everybody's better at online marketing, everybody's better at XYZ, you name it. We've all kind of had to become experts in all these little corners of things that we normally farm them out to someone else.
Just being patient. So a couple things from the chat. Elisa Rockdock, we were talking about, kind of getting out there for the first time again. She said, Evan, that's Evan Lamb. I assume this is for Tarmo Mojo. Elisa, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Said Evan's playing a show on Friday in a theater with limited capacity. It's going to feel so weird and cathartic. And she's playing a wedding in a couple weeks, and she is electric about it. And she hasn't been on a proper stage since 2019.
Congratulations, welcome back.
Years ago. Welcome back, Elisa. ACDC guy 4288 says to Shane, just book shows in Texas and Florida. And then I don't know if, I'm not sure if it's Ski or Sky, asked from Marge, when you said drop an album, is this going to be digital only? Are you going to have physical releases? What's going to be available?
Oh, that's a great question. It's going to be both. We're going to have like a CD release, and then we're going to be doing digital distribution everywhere. And actually, the fun thing, I'm like in the middle of working through my digital distribution today, so I'm hitting refresh on the like, does it actually go through kind of thing.
Right.
So for anyone that doesn't know, if you are doing this yourself, there are many websites that are the distribution companies. You can't just go to like Apple Music or Spotify or like any of the streaming sites and just be like, here's my record, put it up. You have to go through a distribution company.
There's a process.
So like we are in that process right now. And I'm like, please don't let there be any hiccups. Please let it go through. But yeah, you upload your artwork and you upload everything else, and then that goes out to the interwebs, and you can listen wherever you stream music. So that's what we're going for. But yeah, like it's nice to have like a physical copy of something too. Like it makes it real. Yeah. So one day we might press it on vinyl. The more I read about vinyl, the more I'm kind of like, do I want to do vinyl? Like I own tons of vinyl, but like it off gases formaldehyde and stuff, and I'm feeling weird about it. So like that's my personal hang up. So like right now we're just doing CDs, but maybe one day I'm just gonna get the itch and be like, you know what, it needs to like be 12 by 12 as well.
We'll do pressing. Yeah. It's like if I know we can sell these.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna start with CDs, but yeah, there will be a physical copy. We're doing T-shirts and buttons and all that fun stuff. It's nice to have things that you can touch, like tactile, it just makes it real.
And I think
a CD in a vinyl size.
We could do a laser disc.
Yeah.
We could do your model, make music videos for everything, and then put it on a laser disc.
I mean, I
think that's the way to go, really.
I know cassettes have come back to an extent, so who knows, maybe just do an 8-track. Just get ahead of the curve. You know it's coming. Just do an 8-track.
Real.
And reel to reel. I mean, look, if you don't have a reel to reel player in your house, you don't really like music. What are you doing? What are you doing? I'm kidding. I don't have a reel to reel player. And one more question from AC/DC guy 4288. I don't know if either of you will have any idea about this. Do you know, or do you have an opinion on if blockchain technology will affect the music industry?
Oh, we're talking about NFTs.
Yeah.
I mean, I have such complicated feelings about NFTs, because like the hippie in me is like, but the computer has to run all the time and it's going to kill the planet. But then it's kind of like, but there's like the one version of the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if like someone tries to cash in on NFTs.
Right.
Like that's got to be it. Like the like the first televised performance of the Beatles or something, and like you get an NFT for that. Like that's got to be like some millionaire, billionaire is gonna want that.
Yeah, like I now own the what? Oh no, what's
like
the show?
First tweet.
Voice in my head. Yeah. Ed Sullivan. Yeah.
Yeah, the Ed Sullivan
I now own
this
episode of
I
the
own
Ed
that
Sullivan
now.
Show. Yeah. Right. That's wild.
Someone's gonna be like, all right, just take my money. Here we go. Like,
and how will that work with like publishing rights and licenses? And I don't know. It will change. It's going to change something.
I mean,
to answer your question.
Thinking, like just with like the CDs that I'm going to be ordering, like we're a small band, we're probably going to order like 100, maybe 200 copies of something. Like we'll scale up if it takes off, but like we're not going to buy a ton of them because we're new. But like then there's kind of like the scarcity thing. It's like I'm going to hand number each one of them.
Yeah.
And someone gets copy number 1.
Yeah.
So
you get copy number
one. Mom and Dad get copy number 2.
Right. And and like album art. Is that something that is that going to be an NFT? Like, can you just like this is my? Yeah, I have no idea. I know nothing.
I think there's potential there. I have complicated feelings about it because deep down at heart, I'm a hippie and I care about the planet. But
but they're server banks.
They're server banks. Like we'll figure it out. It'll be fine.
But the technology in general is, I think it's going to permeate pretty much everywhere it can. And this whole NFT trend, if it's a trend or if it's long tail, either way, there are collectors out there. This is a modern version of a collectible. And yeah, I see it doing its thing. It's making a lot of money for some people right now.
And especially thinking about some kinds of media, like the Ed Sullivan broadcast. Right. Like, if we actually think about, like, everything's digitized now, so we're in a slightly different world. But there was one tape of that broadcast. It was like what was on the camera. And like that's been digitized, and that's how we see it if we go on the internet now. But that tape has a lifespan.
Right.
So one day you are not going to be able to play that tape anymore, even if you have the right equipment. Even if you repair the equipment, like the magnetism of the tape is going to decay, and you are no longer going to be able to play that tape.
Right.
So having some sort of like original version of the thing
to be owned.
Like, how do we define that, and what is that? Like, that's actually a really hard question.
Right, and do we have ownership, or after a certain point does it just become collective property?
Well, I mean, copyright is the lifespan of the artist plus 70 years in the United States. So, you know, there is a date somewhere out there, and we don't know what it is yet.
Right,
let's hope the surviving Beatles live a very long time. But like there is a date out there where that broadcast is going to be public domain. Yeah,
right. But does the original recording? We could go on about that. There's so many questions.
Is it from the date of the recording? Is it from like the birth of the artist? Right? Like what makes a piece of art? And like, you know, that is not set in stone, because like we can even see copyright law changing within our lifetimes. Where like some countries it's like the lifespan of the artist plus 50 years. Some countries it's the lifespan of the artist plus 70 years. You have to kind of be careful if you're in that gray area, whether like you release in Europe and you do a cover, is it public domain versus if you do it in the United States. And it's just down to like a time frame that's just been decided by the government.
Yeah, we made it up.
And it can change.
Somebody made it up.
Yes, like people agreed on it. It exists because people agreed on it, but also people could agree to change it. So it's kind of like, what does anything mean if it's all just arbitrary?
Yes. So once more to answer your question, how will it change the music industry? The answer is yes.
Yes.
Probably. All right. Well, I think we are the three of us here are just about out of time. So before I let you go, first off, thank you very much for being here and discussing these album releases. And starting with Marge, where can we find M. Jones and the Melee?
So all of our stuff is on www.mjonesandthemelee.com. You can also find us on social media at mjonesandthemelee on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, but we don't really do Twitter.
Okay.
There's nothing there. You'll be disappointed.
And Shane?
Pretty much the same answers. We do have a hailthesun.com. And then, we're most active on Instagram and Facebook. I have nothing to do with the Twitter, but I'm pretty sure people use it.
Yeah, people do that.
Find our music on Spotify, iTunes, or Apple Music, Pandora, wherever. I think it should be everywhere.
All right, awesome. And those links should be in the chat right now. Again, thank you both so much for being here. Right now, we are going to hear our first song from our community guest for the week, Audrey and Kate. Right after that, we're going to hear Sam Schwartz talking about the Stringiverse with Mandolin. We'll see you right after that. Thanks again.
Thanks, Doug.
My pleasure. Take care.
No problem.
We chose two songs, and then which one did you choose, Kate?
Well, what did I choose?
You chose Painkiller. I mean, we both chose both of them. We both agreed on them. And Kate chose Painkiller, and I chose Holy Diver. So, by Killswitch Engage.
Yes.
And then Painkiller by
Judas Priest.
Yeah. So why did you choose
it?
Why did you choose Painkiller?
I don't know the I know the lyrics, so that's why.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun playing it, and we've practiced it many times, né?
Mm-hmm.
And then I chose Holy Diver because I love it when Kate shouts to it. And of course, we both have fun playing these songs, so that's why we chose them. And that shows everything. So here we go. Oh wait, I forgot to do the screen recording. That's a problem. Asha! Painkiller! Ah yeah!
My stupid pet. Yeah! Bye, guys!
Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Strung Out, a guitarist's guide to the Stringiverse. I'm your host, Sam Schwartz. I wanted to talk a little bit about what it's like for guitar players who are like you and myself, who have wanted to check out other instruments but weren't sure where to start or why I'd want to check out that instrument or what that learning curve might look like, right? So like maybe you're thinking, ooh, I really like playing guitar, but I want to play something else. Like, well, what about, I still have a mandolin at the wall of my, local guitar store, like this one, right? And I wanted to see what that was going to be like. So what would that entail? And it's got frets, right? It's got strings. I know how to play stuff with frets and strings, and they can be plucked, and how hard can it really be, right? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how hard it could be. Okay, so for your guitar, right? A guitar has 6 strings, right? We're just going to start with the basics. You all probably know this anyway, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So here are the 6 strings on guitar, right? You have your E, A, D, G, B, and E, right? So that's from low to high. They're tuned in fourths, and then this one is a third between the G and the B, right? So your scale shapes, you have a certain idea of like how your scale shapes work or how your pentatonic scales look, right? There's a certain visualization that guitar players, a lot of times we associate with the guitar. We're not, a lot of us, especially for coming in as rock guitar players, not classical or jazz players, we're kind of associating shapes with sounds. And that's the thing that I tended to do when I played guitar. And so, that is a tricky thing because mandolin is tuned actually the opposite of a guitar, starting with this 4th string right here. So it's actually the lowest string on a mandolin is a G, and then a D, and then an A, and then an E is the highest string. And I'll show you how that sounds in just a sec, okay? Okay, so now you can see that the mandolin is missing from the wall because it's in my hands! And this mandolin is tuned like I was saying. So the low string is a G, G, D, A, E. And so the finger patterns that we're used to as guitar players are sort of reversed, which is how I kind of think about mandolin. I ended up having to play mandolin for a couple of different musical theater shows because they were like, yeah, you play guitar, so you can play mandolin, right? And I was like, I guess. And they were like, yeah, you have a crappy mandolin that you bought at Chico when you were looking at schools with your dad, like at a garage sale for $30, like in 2005, right? And I was like, well, I do. That is exactly what I have. And they were like, so you can play that for a musical theater show, right? And I was like, yeah, I guess I can do that. So I had to figure out very quickly how to start playing the mandolin and switch back and forth from guitar because I was having to pick up the mandolin in between songs where I was playing guitar or I was playing banjo because it's like they give you a book and it says plectrum instruments. And that just means stuff you can play with a pick. It's fretted and strung, and so you can play it. It doesn't matter what the tuning is. You just have to kind of figure it out. So it is tuned in fifths, and I had to figure out how do I start making sense of chords because I already know so much about guitar, right? I've been a guitar player for 20 years. So I've been a guitar player for 20 years now, and I had to associate the stuff that I already knew on guitar to start learning stuff on mandolin, right? And so what I realized was that chords are all kind of backwards if you look at the lowest 4 strings of the guitar and the mandolin, which is like which is these higher tunings, right? So and I had to figure out how to do that. So let me show you kind of what I'm talking about. It's kind of hard to explain, but I'll show you. So I'm going to show you a G chord, right? So a G chord on the mandolin, right? It's open. This is a G, D, and then you can finger a B, which is your 2nd fret on the A string, and then a 3rd fret, which is the G on your E string. And I was like, wait, if I take a guitar, so I'm going to take my guitar. So now here's my guitar, right? And so if I take those same notes, that shape is like this, right? Where I'm fingering the B on the A string and then the G on the high E string. But if I take that and I flip it around, right, it actually is a part of a G chord that we're all used to playing on guitar. right? And I was like, oh, it's backwards, right? So here's the 3rd fret on my E string, my low E string, which is that G note, the B note, which is on the A string here, and then the open D and G strings. And if you flip that around, that's exactly how it looks on mandolin, right? Which I thought was like, oh, that's how you do it. That's how you start to like make the transition from guitar to mandolin, because you can start to see the shapes, just upside down. And they're very different voicings because the strings are tuned a lot higher on a mandolin. But as far as like getting your head wrapped around the logic of what's going on, man, it helps a ton. So I'm going to do a couple more of these here. Okay, so let's say, for instance, you wanted to do like a pentatonic scale, like in A or whatever, right? So this is, right, your minor pentatonic scale in A for guitar. A lot of people know that one, right? But if you go on that G string, right, and you were to do it on your G string down to the low E string, this is how it's kind of going to look on mandolin, right? So you can take this and say, okay, so it's your 2nd fret on the G string, right? Right? And you also know these notes up here, right? So all of these, if you were to do, is your fingering for a pentatonic scale that would coincide with how it looks on mandolin. So let's take a look at how it looks on a mandolin here. So here we go, right? So here's our lowest string on a mandolin. Here's the A here, right? And then if I did, right, kind of like we were looking at on guitar, right? So now we have almost like a new way of thinking about how we can figure out scales on mandolin, because we kind of know them on guitar. And once you start working all of these things out, you'll start to see how they play out on mandolin, right? And so just a couple other things, like the C chord is kind of the same way, right? Where we have a C chord that's like your 3rd fret on the A string, 2nd fret on the D string, and 1st finger on the B string. Well, if you flip that around and think about the lowest 4 strings that you're playing, right? That C chord is like this, right? And that's on the 2nd fret of your D string and the 3rd fret of your A string. Same strings, same frets. The whole thing is just reversed. Right? And once you start realizing how the mandolin tuning works in relationship to the guitar like this, you're going to have a really easy time figuring out how the mandolin works, and you can start playing songs on it pretty fast. Hey folks, so that's basically how the mandolin works, just a sort of a primer course on how you might think about approaching the mandolin versus how you approach the guitar. If you already know a little bit about guitar, right, you can sort of transfer all those scale shapes and all those chord shapes that you can find on those low 4 strings to mandolin and see how they start to make a lot of sense that way. It's a little bit of an awkward transition because you're not used to voicing chords. At least I wasn't used to voicing a lot of chords on those low 4 strings because they kind of sound muddy down there. But if you know some of those shapes, they really transfer over very quickly to mandolin, and you can start really playing fast. It's just a matter of like getting your head wrapped around it, getting your fingers wrapped around to those little tiny positionings. And a lot of times your scales, you're playing more notes on one string, right? Because the strings are tuned farther apart than they are on a guitar. So you're going to have to do a lot more 4 fret scales on one string, or 4 note per string scales as opposed to 3 note per string scales, which is a lot of times what happens on a guitar, right? Yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'd really love to hear those things from you. And stay tuned for the next episode of Strung Out, a guitarist's guide to the Stringiverse, with me, Sam Schwartz, your host.
And welcome back to the live portion of today's Rocksmith developer stream. I am still your host and community developer on Rocksmith, Douglas Lilly. Very glad to be back. Thank you to Sam Schwartz for talking about how you might be able to take what you know in your hands and your brain and your heart about guitar and maybe try out a different instrument. See how it goes. Experiment. If you get your hands on a mandolin over the next couple months, let us know how it goes. Let us know if you're able to sort of flip the switches and make that work. Before that, we saw Audrey and Kate take on some Kill Switch Engage. Coming up right now, we're going to have some more Audrey and Kate, which you can find on YouTube at Audrey123Talks. Twitter is also, I believe, Audrey at 123Talks. That should all be in the chat. Audrey123Talks is in the chat, so if nothing else, they can let us know right there. Coming up right now, we are going to give away 5 copies of the Amaranth Song Pack for Steam. So if you are a PC or Mac player, and you have a Steam account and you have Rocksmith, look in the chat. These are first come, first served. This song pack includes the song Amaranthine, Drop Dead Cynical, and The Nexus. So all of those can be yours if you are one of the first 5 to correctly claim one of those codes. So good luck. And here once more is Audrey and Kate.
Oh, what a beautiful start. Oh my gosh.
You've been down so long in a midnight. I'm sorry. Okay, here we go.
much for watching. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. We'll see you guys again soon.
And welcome back to the this final segment of the Rocksmith stream for today. Speaking of album releases, just not too long ago, a few months ago, Audrey and Kate released some albums. I know you can find them on Spotify, I believe Apple Music as well, maybe. That should be in the chat. They can let us know where you can find that music. Maybe a link in the chat to the Spotify playlist. We'll see. Also in the chat, our own Dan Emmerich, who's a voice in my head, worked with some people. Dan, if you, I know you just said you don't want to come on to talk about it, and that might be a logistical problem now, since I just invited you on to talk. Since you're not talking, I'll assume you can't come on, but he had some special guests, which he will talk about in the chat. So thank you, as always, to Dan Emmerich for running the board. Thank you to our community guests. Doug. Audrey and Kate for playing a couple of tunes for us. Sam Schwartz, back. Welcome back. Very glad to have you with some transferable skills in the Stringiverse. And of course, Shane Gann and Dr. Margaret Jones for talking about releasing albums amidst a pandemic. Also, Yubi Dork, that is Baja, our community manager in the chat. And thank you all of you for being here. Very glad, very happy to be back. And we will see you in a couple of weeks.